we're sort of continuing from last time. It's a continuation from last time. Last time we talked a lot about this machlokes Rabbeinu Tam and the Rash about we talked about Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah. Their machlokes really focused on Belilah Avah. Today we're going to be more on the Belilah Raccah side. Let me just in short tell you that machlokes. The machlokes was the Rabbeinu Tam said that if a person makes a Belilah Avah, then that Belilah Avah is chayiv in hafrashas Challah, sort of no matter what happens to it afterwards. Okay, that's the simple understanding that he says no matter what you do afterwards, no matter what kind of cooking you do to it afterwards, it's not chayiv in hafrashas. It's chayiv in hafrashas Challah, although some didn't. Some understood Rabbeinu Tam to be much more limited than that, but that's a simple understanding that he says is you're chayiv in hafrashas Challah no matter what. And the Rash and many other Rishonim say that no, if the person had in mind when he was making the dough that he was going to use it, he was going to cook it afterwards, like he was going to make donuts, okay, he was going to fry it afterwards. So then the Mechaber said, "Isa should be lost over the Gilgal al Das Lavashal and Taglan for us, okay." And you actually follow through on what you planned with, then Keturah, then there's no chiyuv of Chal. Okay, so the Mechaber passing like the Rash. That if the person had in mind when he was baking it, when he was making the dough, that he will not use this in a bread-like way, he was going to cook it or fry it, then he's not chayiv in hafrashas Challah. That's what the Mechaber passed like. And the Shach said that we should be machmir for Rabbeinu Tam. The Rabbeinu Tam who said is that no, since you made a Belilah Avah at the beginning, you're chayiv in hafrashas Challah. I don't care if you had in mind, you're chayiv in hafrashas Challah. Okay. Yeah. There's a Shach say no. I'm sorry. Hafresh Challah b'loy bracha. Okay. The Shach says a different eitzah, which is going to come from a later din, which is there are ways to make yourself actually chayiv that even the Rash would agree that you be chayiv. So you should do one of those eitzahs to make yourself really chayiv l'chol hadays. Okay, he says, I'm sorry. He says it's chomer to do without a bracha. Okay, that's a machlokes, and now machlokes really have to do with Belilah Avah. Okay.
Does it get the donuts?
Yeah, it's going to get to donuts. If I make dough and I plan on frying them and turning them into donuts, that's the plan. That's what I'm making. And I work in television. I'm making blue and white donuts for Yom Ha'atzmaut. So I'm making my donuts. I know that's what I'm trying to do. So what do you say? What about Spanish like tomorrow? So the guy's making. He knows he's going to make donuts. He's going to make donuts. So the Mechaber says that person is part of hafrashas Challah. Okay, and the Rabbeinu Tam says no. Since you made a Belilah Avah, you're hafrashas Challah. Okay. So I don't know if the bakery pays attention to that. Some of them are hafrashah from every dough. I don't know if they're thinking, but a bracha.
It might be Challah.
It might be. Yeah, but when they make it, the guy knows that I'm not.
I'm not going to make.
I have a feeling that they're more, that have
no difference
more planned. I have a feeling
in the dough.
Sugar, less sugar.
I have a feeling that they're more planned in how they. Okay, okay. So today we're talking about a different child, which we'll see seemingly is connected, and that is like this. The thing is, the Belilah Raccah is mechuyev in hafrashas Challah. Okay, Belilah Raccah means I mix flour and water together in a way that it comes out very watery, not like a thick dough like a bread dough. So the thing is, you mechuyev in hafrashas Challah. Okay, the question is, when do I do that? Belilah Raccah is chayiv in hafrashas Challah under the right conditions. Yeah. So the shaila is, when do you do that hafrashas Challah? Okay. So what's the question? The question. What time do you do hafrashas Challah? So the simple thing you say is, we're in Siman Shin Chav Tes over here. In Siman Shin Chav Zayin, it said, when you do hafrashas Challah, when you mix the flour and water together, that's when you do hafrashas Challah. That's when you're chayiv in hafrashas Challah. As soon as you mix the flour and water together, that's when you're chayiv. So you turn another page or two, and you find out that, one more page, turn the next page to Shin Chav Tes, and you find out that Belilah Raccah is also chayiv. So the seemingly is, you're chayiv when you mix the flour and water together. That's what Mechaber said. How chiyuv of hafrashas Challah is when you mix the flour and water together. Now you turn the page and find, and Belilah Raccah is also chayiv. Okay, so Belilah Raccah is chayiv also when you mix the flour and water together. That's no one is saying differently. No one here on this page says that you should do it any differently because it just assumed you do that way. That would be the simple reading if you just open up the Shulchan. Okay, but there's in a number of places Tosfos says not like that. Okay, Tosfos brings it's talking about the Gemara that David just mentioned. Okay, the Gemara says like this: Harei shegaza so shachitin the tachna for awful the hafrashah menu Challah. Okay, the Gemara talks about a gazlan who stole wheat and he turned it in. He baked something. He was mafresh Challah, and the Gemara says he didn't. Whatever. What the Gemara says. What about him? It's not important to tell us what the Gemara says. Okay, so the Gemara. So Tosfos says, how come the Gemara said this out of order? He's gaza so shachitin the tachna for awful the hafrashah menu Challah. No, that's the wrong order. Really, your tachna hafrashah menu Challah for awful. It happens after you hafresh Challah when you mix the flour and water together. So why is the order backwards? Why is hafresh Challah the last thing the guy did instead of before Avah? That's where it belongs. Okay. So Tosfos says, you have an answer.
No.
Okay, so you're about to tell us something. Okay, so Taisa says.
Taisa say something exciting.
Okay. So Taisa says the reason why is because sometimes you're not mafresh challah until after you bake it. Like if you make a Belilah Raccah, like you have sufkin in, those kind of things, you're not chayav in challah until you make it till you bake it. So when the Gemara was saying the story about the gazlan and whatever the din is about the gazlan, not important to us, the Gemara wanted to say a case that he was mafresh challah in a way that you're always the right way to do that, and that is after you baked it. After baking it, you're always chayav in hafrashas challah. So the Gemara wanted to say a case that you'd be for sure chayav in challah. What would be the logic? The Kashrus doesn't say, but what's the svara? The logic is that the chiyuv of hafrashas challah has to do with it having a certain of it being lechem. The Belilah Raccah is not lechem until you actually baked it. So the Belilah Avah, as we've been seeing, the Belilah Avah, already in its form, the dough, you already look at it, you say, this is going to be bread. It's obvious what this thing is. The Belilah Raccah, this watery cake batter, doesn't look like, has no shaykhs to being bread. It's only when you bake it that it first gets that ability, or you say, now this is bread, so therefore you'd wait to be mafresh challah until then. Okay, Taisa doesn't say what the svara is, but seemingly that's what he means, that's what the svara is. Okay? So, we have, the Taisa says, it's in a few places, Taisa says this thing, that for Belilah Raccah, you only mafresh challah after you bake it. So you said pancakes, it's not when you make the batter, it's when you make the pancakes, then you be mafresh challah. But you don't see that anybody here saying that. I mean, again, Shulchan on the page beforehand says, you mafresh challah when you mix the flour and water together. And then he says, and Belilah Raccah is also kind of, you can say a bunch of other strange cases here. This whole sim is all kinds of unusual breads, and when they're chayav in hafrashas challah, or if they're chayav in hafrashas challah, he doesn't tell you, and they all have the same thing, which is you have hafrashah. Okay. So it's a question. It's sort of a question. Is Taisa right, or are we reading this wrong in Shulchan? Which way is the right way to? When are you supposed to be mafresh challah? Or do we not pass that? Well, okay, so something's going on here. Okay, so this question. Raccah says, I know the answer to the question. Okay? He says, it's
question, don't replace it anywhere.
I'm going to take you, I'm going to turn the page. A little bit about people who talk about it. Not very much. Nobody on this page. No one on this page says anything about that.
Okay, what's the question?
Should it be mafresh challah when you mix the flour and water together, or should it be mafresh challah after you bake it?
Why doesn't it turn out to say like
if the din is like Taisa that you're supposed to be mafresh challah after you bake it, so why doesn't it say that? Why doesn't anybody? Doesn't Taz say? Why doesn't Taz say? Oh, and don't forget, don't be mafresh challah till later. No one says it. Okay, maybe. So hold that a second. Hold that thought. I don't know what that would mean, but I'm going to tell it to you in a second. I'm going to say it back to you. Okay, but anyhow, so Raccah says, I tell you the answer. Okay, now, first let me just tell you the structure of what he said, and then I'm going to explain to you the thinking of what he said. Okay, he said it's like this. He says, the reason why it doesn't say, the Shulchan doesn't tell you that you do the hafrashas challah if you bake it, is because the machaber passes like the Rash about a Belilah Avah. That's why by Belilah Raccah it doesn't tell you when you should mafresh challah. But if we want to be mafresh for Rabbeinu Tam, Taisa is going l'shita Rabbeinu Tam. Taisa doesn't say that. Taisa is going l'shita Rabbeinu Tam, and therefore if Taisa is, again, I'm not telling you the reason, I'm just telling you the structure here. Taisa is going with Rabbeinu Tam, then hafrashas challah comes later on. The machaber passes like the Rash, and since the din is like the Rash, so he says he doesn't have to tell you when the hafrashah is. The hafrashah happens right away when you mix the flour and water together. Okay, so you want to know why there's. It's not a steer, because Taisus is in Shitas Rabbeinu Tam, the Machaber is in Shitas Harash, and therefore, the end of the sentence is, and therefore, since the Shach says we should be Machmir for Rabbeinu Tam, part of that Chumrah is, Taisus is not Belilah Avah. Part of the Chumrah is that when you do a Belilah Raccah, you shouldn't be Mafresh challah until after you bake it. Okay, so it goes, even though the Shulchan didn't bring Rabbeinu Tam, didn't bring the Taisus about being Mafresh later on, he didn't bring that because of the way he paskins. But since we want to be Machmir for the Shita of Rabbeinu Tam, that Belilah Avah, you chayav like Rabbeinu Tam, therefore we also should wait to be Mafresh until after you bake it. Okay? So somehow it fits in that these Shitas are connected to each other. Okay? Now again, Taisus doesn't say anything about Rabbeinu Tam. Okay? But that's what he says. Okay? What would be the logic? What's the connection? What does the Rash and Rabbeinu Tam about Belilah Avah have to do with this child about Belilah Raccah? They seem to have nothing to do with each other. Okay? So he said like this. He said, according to the Rash, the Rash says that if I make a Belilah Avah and I had in mind that I'm going to cook it later on, I'm not going to turn it into lechem, it's not chayav in hafrashas challah. So he says, basically, the Rash holds that there's no Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah are the same thing. If you mix flour and water together, you're chayav in hafrashas challah. But it depends what you had in mind. If I had in mind to do the following end, then it's chayav. And had in mind to do the other thing, then it's potter. But they're the same thing. But Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah don't have any difference. There's no inherent difference in them. It all depends on what you had in mind when you were baking it. And therefore, the Rash says, so the time for Chiv Hafrashas Challah is when you mix the flour and water together. When I mix them together, that's when the Chiv happens. Of course, depending on what's cooking in my mind, what I'm thinking about, but it all happens at the same time. Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah is the same thing. So just like the din is Belilah Avah, the hafrashah happens when you mix the flour and water, so too Belilah Raccah is the same thing. But Rabbi Tam holds, no, Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah are not the same thing. That Chiv Hafrashas Challah happens when it turns into lechem. So Belilah Avah becomes lechem immediately. As soon as you mix the flour and water together, you can see that this is a lechem type thing. This is headed to being lechem. It's chayiv then. Belilah Raccah is not chayiv Hafrashas Challah until you bake it. That's when it becomes lechem. So for the same reason, if the chiv is not when you mix it. It doesn't matter what you think. The chiv depends on when it becomes lechem. So Belilah Avah becomes lechem when you mix the flour and water, and Belilah Raccah becomes lechem when you bake it, and therefore the chiv Hafrashas Challah is only to later. Okay. That's what he wants to say, that we're being mi'ash of this, so to speak, stira, that really the Mechaber says Belilah Avah, the Mechaber says Belilah Raccah you mafresh when you need it because he passes like the Rash, and the Shach, who says like Rabbi Tam, would say you'd be due later on. Now, Rabelsky didn't buy it. He says no. Everybody holds like Tosis. There's no shaykhs between Tosis, Machlokes Rashi, Rabbi Tam, and Belilah Avah, and Tosis and Belilah Raccah have no shaykhs to each other. So he said, okay, so tell us. Everybody holds that you do the hafrashah later on. I said, okay, so how come no one says that over here? How come nobody says that? So he said, he says, it's all hafrashah. Of course, a Belilah Raccah, you only do hafrashah after you bake it. He said, no, we didn't get that. Why is that so pashut? I mean, if I hadn't seen Tosis, why would I think that it's pashut that you don't mafresh challah until after you bake it? There is a svara to be mafresh later on. The svara is that's when it becomes lechem. Okay, but why is that pashut? I don't know why that was pashut.
Let's you change your mind.
What?
If you don't end up baking it.
Let's say you don't end up baking it.
Are you chayiv?
No, then you're not chayiv.
Yes, you're only chayiv when the chiyuv kicks in.
So you're saying that's when it gets determined that it's going to be chayiv hafrashas challah. It's determined at that point. Until then, it was sort of up in the air which way it was going to go. We weren't sure what was going to happen to it. So we have to wait till we know for sure. Okay, and you're saying that, and that's so obvious. No, he's saying to everybody. He's saying no matter what the din's going to be. Belilah Raccah Lamaisa is not chayiv until it's not chayiv if you end up not baking it. What if you don't bake it into something? It's going to be potter. So he says so. The person.
If you're cooking it,
you're not chayiv. This is the Belilah Raccah, Belilah Avah.
Yeah.
How do you know one's chayiv?
Because if you don't bake it, if you cook it, if you would cook that dough, if you take the pancake batter and you cook it in water, then it's not chayiv hafrashas challah. Belilah Avah, no, the Belilah Avah, if you had originally planned to bake it and then you changed your mind, then it would be chayiv hafrashas challah.
Oh, you get to the
Maybe say about Belilah Raccah also.
That what?
You originally planned to break it. You didn't break it.
No, that's not true. That's not correct. That was last time. We said that last time. Okay.
Oh, you get the lavish challah in Isa.
Because?
From a batter, a little loose batter.
So you're saying according to some people who say that the bracha, it was a big shiloh we had in Shulchan what the bracha is. If the bracha is lahafresh challah with Isa, then you have what to say. Okay, so I have to tell you something. Even if you think that this, you might think that it's true. I'm not going to say it's not true. I'm thinking, but that was so pashut. The Mechaber didn't even have to tell us that. He was like, so everybody knows that. I don't have to tell you that. Okay, maybe. So he says. So. To which he said back, he says, well, like you don't think that it's true. Okay, you don't think it's so obvious. You're saying it because this is the kind of thing you have to tell us. Okay, so he says, okay, so according to Rabbi Shechter, that the Mechaber didn't say it because he passed things like the Rash. So he doesn't tell us because he holds you have to do hafrashah when you mix flour and water together. But the Shach, who passes like Rabbi Tam, why didn't he tell us? And now that I told you that in Sifkat and Daled, that Belilah Avah needs we pass like Rabbi Tam, you're always chayiv. He says, and guess what, guys? When you do Belilah Raccah, L'shit Hasenu, you have to do it when you bake it. How come he didn't tell us that?
You have to do it, or it's a hidden?
No, it's I'm chayiv then. It's not chayiv until then. So why didn't the Shach tell us that?
Yeah, but it's fine.
If you did it early, that's totally in the shayla about whether if you mafresh with flour even, you might work.
It's better than flour.
Okay, I don't know. So he says, how come the Shach didn't tell us that? How come the Shach didn't say, well, if you shit Rabbeinu Tam, you have to do that. Even you, Rabbi Shach, agree that shit Rabbeinu Tam, you have to do that at a certain point. So how come the Shach didn't tell us? Because these things are obvious. Everybody knows it. Okay, I don't understand what that means. That it's obvious. I don't mean. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's obvious means it's so posh. You don't have to tell me that kind of thing. Okay. So now when if you think about it, if we stop here for a second. Rabbi Belsky is saying, be mafresh. Everybody holds you mafresh if you bake it. Rav Shecht is saying is, no, according to the Mechaber, you could be mafresh earlier, but according to Rabbeinu Tam, you should be mafresh later on. So in practice, he would tell you, be mafresh later on. Okay, so it would seem like they're not arguing about anything. Okay? I mean, they're arguing about the academics, the alumnus. Is it according to everybody or according to some sheetahs? But in practice, I mean, if you look at our nusach and use nusach, but how they do the tevel system, what do they say? They say, and if it's a Belilah Raccah, I want that hafrashah to happen after we bake it. You have to bake it. So in practice, they seem to be they're arguing in the Avana of what's going on here is that the sheetahs, everybody or somebody. But no. But the question, but are they anything practical? And the answer is yes, they are. Okay, the answer is like this. So, like this. There are really short shuvas from Shlomo Zalman and Rav Vosner. This is really saying like Rebelski. You do the hafrashah after you bake it. Okay? You do the hafrashah for Belilah Raccah after you bake it. They're short. They don't say very much. There wasn't like very much, back and forth to explain. They just say they do it. But both of them, I think, tell you to look at a sefer called Teres Haaretz. Okay, sefer, the person's name is, if I remember the last name, Clears. Okay, someone who lived in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Okay, and he wrote a sefer called Teres Haaretz. You can imagine what it's about. Okay, so in this sefer, he has a whole what? So he was the, if I got it correctly, he was the Rav Rosh. If I got it correctly. So he writes. He has a lot to say about this. Okay, and along the way, he suggests that we say, like, essentially what Rabbi Shechter says, that if Talid Machlekes the Rashi Rabbeinu Tam, he wants to be Talid in that Machlekes. I don't believe he comes out with Maskon like that, but that he wants to be Talid in that Machlekes. But he's talking about a Shayla of Halach L'Maisa. Okay, and the Shayla of Halach L'Maisa is the following, which is like this. Let's say I take batter. Okay, I have two examples of it. I take a batter, and when it's a Belilah Raccah, and it has a share of Hafrashas Challah. But it does not have a share of Hafrashas Challah after I bake it. Okay, which is actually a very common situation. Okay, it only had a share of Hafrashas Challah in the watery stage. Before I baked it, I'll tell you what I mean. You go to the bakery, and they make two sponge cakes, two big sheet pans of sponge cake. Okay, and in total, it takes 3 pounds of flour. Okay, it's a Belilah Raccah, you use very little flour. 3 pounds of flour, and they make these two huge sponge cakes. So, if the chiyuv of Hafrashas Challah is when the flour and water will mix together, they put them into this one huge bowl, they mix the whole big liquid batter up together, there's a chiyuv of Hafrashas Challah. There was a shir challah now. Then they pour it into these two sheet pans, and they bake the two sheet pans. Okay, they bake one pan, and they put the other pan in the oven, they bake the second one. So, at the time of the so to speak, Lisha, when the water and flour and water mixed together, there was a chiyuv of Hafrashas Challah. There was a shir challah. Later on, there was no shir challah. So, is that chayiv and challah? Is it not chayiv and challah? According to Rebelski, it's not chayiv and challah. There was never a shir challah. There was a shir challah before it was chayiv and challah. There was a shir challah when it was just flour and water mixed together. So, not chayiv and Hafrashas Challah. According to Rabbi Shechter, he says, if we're going to be machmir for Rabbeinu Tam, that's chayiv. I'm sorry, if we're machmir, the Rash, the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch, the Ikad is like the Rash, that the chiyuv of Hafrashas Challah is when you mix the flour and water together. So I have to wait, usually he says, I'll wait to be mafresh Challah till later. But it is chayiv of Hafrashas Challah. It had a shear back at the beginning. Okay? Well, what happens if you have...
Would it make a difference if it's baked together at the same time?
I'm about to say that. What happens if I have in camp? Okay, I saw this once in a camp. Okay, they're making pancakes. Okay, so they make, how many do they make? 500 pancakes in the morning? Okay, so when they make 500 pancakes, between all those, there's a shir challah, the amount of flour that they use. It's a Belilah Raccah. But there's never a shir challah after the baking. How many fit onto the grill at once? 20, 30. There's no shir challah in those. Every one has a tiny bit of flour in it. Okay, it's a Belilah Raccah. There's very little flour. So in the big bowl that I mixed it in, there was a shir challah. After I bake it, when I make things, there's no shir challah afterwards. So now there's a little side point which you have to just mention, which is like this. You'll remember that there's...
Now when you make a bracha, it's a subject between the way to learning. Why look at you would make a bracha on Hafrashas Challah on these pancakes, for example? So you would make a bracha. You would theoretically make a bracha on Belilah Raccah. But the question is, the shayla coming up is that in a Belilah Raccah, it's almost never that you have the shir challah. I don't know, but it's not as common to have the shir challah after you bake it also. We do all the cupcakes in the bakery at one time.
Okay, so now we had a thing before him. This is like a side point. I hope I don't confuse it. Right? We had a side point which was no, which is called an isasur l'chalik. Okay, which is to say that the din is really, even though you have to have a shir challah when you mix the flour and water together, you really have to keep it together all the way till the baking. You have to have a shir challah. So I'm telling you that there was no shir challah later on, but there was a shir challah at the beginning. So I'm just throwing out to you that the din, to get away from that problem of Isa Shul Chag is really easy. Okay, it's pretty easy to get away from that. For example, if the bakery made 2 big sponge cakes, and it's possible that one shul will buy both sponge cakes and make it serious later on, it's chayav hafrashas challah. Okay, so it doesn't. It's not considered isur shul challah. But in order to be chayav challah, to say it had the shear later on, it would have to mount have a shear. You have to do a formal tziruf and this and that. If it's even possible, you get away from isur shul challah. Okay, so it's going to come out. It's going to come out that this machlokes that they're having is not a theoretical one. Again, the way I said to you at the beginning was, they're arguing whether everybody else to do it later on or only some people on. But when I said, they both said you should do the hafrashah later on. But it comes out a big nafkin, which is what the Torah's article is talking about, is, are you actually chayav hafrashas challah when it was only a sheer challah in the liquid stage and not in the baked stage? Okay, so one last thing to tell you is just a question. Okay? A question on what Rabbi Shachta said. Just a question, which is, Rabbi Shachta's overall looking at this is that according to the Rash, Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah essentially have the same din. It all depends on what you had in mind when you baked it. They basically have the same din, and therefore that's the time when the chiyuv comes on. Okay, the nice is that we spoke last time is this whole machlokes, the Rash and the Tam revolves around the 4th and the 5th Mishnah in Challah, and the 4th Mishnah we said last time there's a deal. Everyone's medayik. It says hasufkinin apart from hafrashas challah, and there's whatever that funny case is that it's talking about. And why does it say sufkinin? Why does it say Belilah Raccah is apart from hafrashas challah in that funny case? Why doesn't it say everything is apart from hafrashas challah in the special case that it is? Whatever that special case is, according to the Gemara. Why does it everything? And the reason is because there's a special kula for Belilah Raccah. That's the point. Sufkanin is Belilah Raccah has a special kula. There's no chiyuv hafrashas challah under whatever the special circumstances of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish hold. There's a kula for Belilah Raccah, and Belilah Avah is not have that kula. And from there blossoms the machlokes, the Rashi and time. What's the chumrah of Belilah Avah? But the whole point of their machlokes starts from an assumption that Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah do not have the same thing. They're not. No, that's the whole point is that they are not the same. It's not that he's Rabbi Shachta saying that's exactly the same. Just depends what you had in mind. Usually Belilah Avah ends up this way. Belilah Raccah is it's not true. We medayik from the Mishnah Dal together with Mishnah Hay that Belilah Raccah has special coolers because it's not really so bread-like. So it's not so clear what he's saying. He's making an assumption that according to the Rash, Belilah Raccah and Belilah Avah are exactly the same. That's not so clear.